Good morning and welcome again to PAX's annual Protection of Civilians Conference. We're very pleased to be here to have you join us for our first official session of this year's event. My name is Carrie Huisman. I am a member of PAX's Protection of Civilians team, and I'll be your facilitator for this session. Please note that we were originally supposed to be joined by Martijn Beerthuizen from the Department of Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but unfortunately he was unable to join us at the last moment. Luckily, I'm still joined by 3 expert speakers today, and I'll hand things over to them shortly. I assume most of our audience was able to join us already for the opening remarks delivered just a few moments ago. But for those who might just be joining us, I want to run through just a few points about our conference program and the online platform. Throughout this session, you'll be able to submit questions or comments to those of us on the panel using the Slido module. Notice that if you are watching the live stream online in full screen mode, you'll have to minimize the screen in order to see the Slido Q&A field next to the live stream feed. Please, we ask that you keep your questions brief and, if possible, to direct them to specific members of the panel who you think are best suited to answer your question. Our technical moderators will be reviewing these questions and feeding them to those of us in the studio. For those of you who are joining us live in our in-person audience, please note that there is a camera or there's a microphone available if you would like to ask questions directly live to our panelists as well. As many of you are likely visiting the online platform for the first time today, we certainly encourage you during the break to tour the platform, to acquaint yourself with the full program, to look at the expert list of speakers that we have lined up for you for the next 3 days, to look at the networking tools that we have available, as well as the very detailed resource library that we have curated for each day of the event. If you need any additional tips on how to get the most out of the online platform, there's also a quick start guide posted in the library as well for your reference. If you do encounter any technical issues throughout the event, there is a live help desk available every day during the conference. Just go to the homepage, look on the menu button, and you'll see a direct link to the live help desk. We certainly encourage our audience to post any key takeaways, important points from the sessions on social media and on other platforms using the hashtag PAX PoC 21. If you do capture images or quotes, we just ask that you credit the details accordingly to our speakers. And please do remember that this session will be recorded and broadcast later on our website, protectionofcivilians.org. So, to the content of this morning's session. The purpose this morning is to discuss the protection and law enforcement issues that are most important in South Sudan today, but as well to explore local perceptions about the role of national authorities as well as the international community in better addressing these challenges. We're joined today by 3 subject matter and context experts. To my right here is John Malith Mabor, who's a senior program officer with us at PAX, based in Juba, South Sudan. John obtained a law degree from Kampala International University and has many years of experience working with local civil society organizations, including the South Sudan Law Society, the Community Empowerment for Progress organization, and the South Sudan Action Network on Small Arms, before he joined PAX officially in 2020. I'm also joined on my left by Anton Quist. Anton is the project lead for PAX's Human Security Survey project in South Sudan. He joined PAX in 2013 and was also a founding member of our Protection of Civilians department in 2016. Anton is a specialist in themes of human security and civil-military interaction, and also has a background in social sciences and development studies. In a few moments, I will also introduce you to our final speaker, Girmay Gebrekidan, who is joining us remotely from Addis Ababa. He will respond after the initial presentations by both Anton and John. So first, to you, John, how does PAX as an organization position itself with regards to issues of law enforcement and security sector reform in South Sudan?
Thank you very much, Carrie. The Human Security Survey in South Sudan is a grassroots and a bottom-up approach that had been running for the last 6 years. This project intends to carry out investigation we assess information about people's security, civilian perceptions regarding their security. So we do this through the training of enumerators locally recruited from within the communities. And then we send them to the field to collect the information. After the information is obtained about the general perceptions, general experience, the security experience of the civilian, we engage the local authorities, including the community representatives, to discuss the findings. So it is from here that we were able to identify some of the gaps in regards to the security actors' presence and how they respond to the security need of the people.
Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean by this idea of a law enforcement gap, and what does that look like in a context like South Sudan?
For example, in our methodology, as I said earlier, we are able to ask some questions from the civilians. What kind of security threat they encountered, and where do they report the incidences? So the most important security actor that they always report the incident to is the police. And then when we talk of law enforcement gap, of course, the civilians have greater expectation from the police. They expect the police to perform to their satisfaction. But to some extent, we find that the police is not doing enough simply because of the logistics, simply because of the capacity and the equipment. Yeah.
Right. And I believe you wanted to show us some footage from Lake State in South Sudan, some examples perhaps of the really practical challenges faced by police in that part of South Sudan. Can you maybe give us a little bit of an introduction to what we're about to see?
Yeah, thank you. We have been carrying out the assessment in 4 locations originally, but last year we added the 5th location, the Eastern Equatorial State, Magui County, and then the same issues came up from the communities, and just recently in September we have been in lakes, and we have some documentary. So maybe I would like to ask the video to be presented about the law enforcement testimonies in Awarial County to see what I was explaining, that the gap indeed exists simply because even the police themselves were able to acknowledge that they were not able to provide because they lack some facilities.
لكن بدأ شهر 7 2003 أجري يبان ما أنا دوبين كين جبنا دا أجلوي شلانين بين مجرمين أريوج أجردام سولون دا ما أنا جالا كويس وقت تبانين الزمن ويره لكن ما أنا من سيوكه زمن جرّ لرين بين أشيويا مرتاحين ما أنا جرايم ديلو أرجع أني لا بين كان بوليس كله بينك بوليس كون كذا نعم تدريب جديد ولا بوكون بوليس بدور ميدانيش نعم تلاو بنان سفود كون كان ببوليس ميداني تكيلا وارينا السبب يا ماري بقى بقى فوج بقى بترين بيربى لوي كوج توكن رويا بوليس مكاتب جمن محلات يقلوني في يامارك مكاتب عليوتين جمن مكتب توتين هي مكتب تونزول أواريال ko golto pa yamat ke detem ajini je ke doro ajini je makatib na non support dia da ko maktab ke police be loy yen ke chok maktab tan tin akor si yana acha go ngin ma na on di kwem korsiena magam dan tina yana nyalte na liga ci dong da ci raj ko makati ci ci riak ayamin alifen usaba ka loyen wala fen kam da gol ka loy mana ko loy wer ko ja bolit ko hajir do ma da peci ku cholanga ba kan ya jeri ya kumun sioki ba jala kuma ku jona sa fodira be bolit ko me dani be poj bara jal salahu tamam ya poja luel taban na non ka poj ga jeji madal na poj ko a poj ko ka ja e poj ke dong ti chigir bi ga de biutin bu poj dara bu poj bolit ko yelo ko di a chan zaman ko me بدمن جماعة كأنه بيتورين كأجي كامرنين مو أريا كجلوي كأن دي عندي مكتب كلوي كبوج على support بالوي كبيان كبوج بقى بيجول كبايامات كلوي كديكي بايتن أو دور بيان كبوجين بقى بوج إدارة بقى بوج بوليس يوم يلوي بقى بيجام نيم يعني بوليس 10 يوم 20 يوم كابيرلوي كبوليس جدد كيالوي لكان support بايا كا بيان كبوج كيالوي.
According to my view, some of the police officers, they are lacking skills. They wanted more training, especially on the rule of law. They wanted equipment like computers in the offices. They also need to be informed in terms of training that I talked about before, which is the most important to them. Our current state government is responsible for the security of the people. We are trying to normalize the problems or the challenges that are facing our people, especially on the issues of revenge killing and cattle raiding. So I wish the international community also should continue to support to train our people, to support our justice or courts, because we have mobile court now in our state. And this mobile court needs support. It needs mobility. It also needs money or financial to support them or to facilitate them.
Police is the most important organ that could be engaged in protection of civilians from any acts of abuse. There's need for conventional training of police in the areas of criminal law and in the areas of human rights, and then make sure that trained with the basic principles of the roles of police in relation with the citizens. They need moral orientation in how, when you administer a good citizen, what will be the end gain later on when the citizen is become a good citizen, well-informed citizen, to abide by laws. That one is the role of police, to stand with the citizens.
Anton, I'd like to turn to you now, perhaps reflecting on some of the challenges we just heard, but also what we know about the capacities of local police in South Sudan. What should organizations like PAX or other institutions working on the ground do to more effectively support them and ultimately contribute to more effective protection of civilians on the ground?
Yes, thanks. I think we should continue at least collecting testimonies from community members in the areas concerned. I think it's very important that we go back every year to collect their experiences and their perceptions, and so that we are also able to see how these perceptions develop, how the security situation develops, and how people respond to that and perceive that. I think it's also important to ask for people's opinions and perceptions uncensored, so like without us telling them first what we are able to provide or what are our limitations in doing so. so that we at least get a clear picture of what are people's genuine experiences and needs. So that's also what we're doing through our survey. And just to give you an example of the data that we collect, I've also prepared 2 slides that also focuses on the perceptions regarding police. So for instance, we were asking people whether what security actors were actually available to them, were actually present in their localities. And the police scored an average of 70%. That was the highest scoring security actor of all security actors. So National Army, Armed Youth, other actors, the police scored highest. But of course, this 70% is an average of all the 5 states in which we survey. So there were also areas in which this accessibility and presence was much lower. And we also ask about the basic performance, how do people perceive the performance of the police? And we saw that 69% of respondents thought that the police was generally doing a good job. So that creates a basis in which investments in police capabilities can also lead to tangible results at the community level. And then when we asked them, okay, what do you think needs to change, or what do we need to develop in the police to improve their performance? And you see that the majority of respondents said that they need to be better trained. We didn't specify into what particular training they need, but at least they need to be trained as well as have a bigger presence in the localities. So these were the perceptions that communities share with us, and that are also acknowledged usually by local police when they come to our community engagement meetings. So I think it's important that we keep collecting these testimonies, because it does not only give people a voice, but it also improves our own knowledge about what is going on in often very remote localities. Of course, it also increases expectations of communities that we are also able to address some of the challenges that they share with us, which is also a challenge for us as a fairly small NGO. Like, how are we going to address these challenges? And a lot of the challenges that they share are also not easily addressed on the local or the regional level. So that is why we also acknowledged that we need to bring certain levels up to the national level in the capital, Juba. So this is why we thought of organizing an event in which, for instance, these local civil society as well as local police inspectors are able to meet and share their perspectives with members of UN police and the UNDP, for instance, and foreign embassies, so that they can share their challenges with them, and also members of the international community can share what is already happening on security sector reform and police training. So we can. We also have a video summarizing how that event in Juba went 2 weeks ago.
The biggest challenges we have there on the ground, especially in Eastern Equatoria State, we are lack of mobility because we have a long distance when something happen in the villages, and we receive the information. You cannot move immediately up to there because we don't have vehicles. Even though we have vehicles, we have only 2 or 3. And the vehicles is in bad condition. They will not be able to move up to that side.
The many challenges of police in protection of civilian several. One is the number of the police. In many areas, there are no police station.
One of the biggest challenges for police is logistical challenges. We need to send police to the community, and most of the community doesn't have police station, so police is not accessible. So that is one of the challenges, because if the police is not present, it means that there is no protection for the community. So police has to be present within the various jurisdiction in order for them to protect the civilian, and they need to also have the kind of logistics they will be able to use to protect the population, the civilians, because now the crime is dynamic. So if you have the citizen having a lot of arms and the police doesn't have a kind of weapon to meet the criminal on the ground, it will be difficult for police to combat them.
They have to do a very tough job, engaging with communities, engaging with people who are in dire conflict, oftentimes with people who are also much more armed than they are. So we're asking a lot of these of the police in South Sudan.
We have investigation training. Number 2, we have also awareness for the GBV and community policing also. We need police to be trained so that they will help the community.
I think one key training which the police need, one is training in the rule of law. In rule of law, where they are trained in human rights and the protection of citizens, which is their paramount mandate, and then how they can respond to different issues that come along affecting the needs of the civilian. And this is what is really, for me, fundamental, apart from this physical equipment, but the mind that is to be equipped, that the civilian are the paramount mandate for them to work toward to protect. That falls all under police awareness in the rule of law, human rights, and humanitarian law.
You know, in security sector reform, there has been a lot of component that has been enshrined in the revitalized agreement. When you look at Chapter 2, it talks about security sector reform in terms of what the various institutions are supposed to be doing in order to reform the system. One, it talks about, when you look at the 2.3, it talks about reviewing the security laws, which the partners, UNDP, we have been able to support the government in reviewing the 5 security laws. And the 2 is for them to also develop eligibility criteria and then we move on to DDR, we move on to training. So all the components are there.
There are a number of activities that we've been doing as far as our mandate in South Sudan as UNPOL is concerned. And we all know that it is our mandate to capacitate our SSNPS officers to be able to deliver on their constitutional mandate. There are a lot, and which I can enumerate it. The first is that we are conducting a number of training on human rights. We want to conscientize them or create the awareness about the fact that as police, it is their duty to protect and promote the right of each and everyone. And so it's part of the daily trainings that we are conducting. Also, we do train them on how to investigate SGBV cases. And with this, we need to we support them to know the law and how to apply it, how they are to manage the case files, and also how they can forge ahead, get in a witness statement, and try to send cases to court. Aside that, we are supporting with the development of policies, especially with regards to SGBV. Currently, we have supported in the development of an SOP on investigation of SGBV cases.
I think one is awareness raising, and that we need to let the population understand the work of police. And then the awareness raising is in the two sides. The police side, we need to build their capacity to know their responsibility, what they are supposed to do, because the community is their friend, and then the police is also community friend. And one cannot do without the other. So they need to work hand in hand. So what we need to do is to do more of awareness, capacity building internally for police, and also raise awareness for the community to understand the responsibility and the role of police in order to work with them, accept them, so that the local police community will have confidence in the local police, and the police will also serve them, because the duty bearers are supposed to also provide services to the community.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is actually to build trust between the police and the civilians and the community. And they should know that the police exist because of them, and the police should also know that they are part of the community, and therefore they have to cooperate with the community for them to identify and get information on suspect or those who suspected of having committed a crime. So it is always sometimes the community to inform them. They facilitate actually the services of the police.
So if we relate that to the police here in South Sudan, then it would focus a lot on the way in which communities are able to work together with the police, because that's also a reform of the security sector. Here in South Sudan, I would argue that starting from there, starting with communities together with the police, having them work together in order to reduce violence, to create a conducive environment for the people to be more secure, would be the best start for security sector reform, and not the more traditional security sector reform where we are on a very high level, a very high abstract level, but we really need to focus on a very local level, because that's where the real needs are at this point.
Right. So Anton and John, 2 weeks ago, you convened this event with civil society, local security service providers, and members of the international community to talk about particularly these types of challenges. Could you share with us some of the main outcomes of this event? Maybe first, Anton, to you.
Well, first of all, it was very enlightening to have both perspectives in one room together, because the perspectives as such were not that different or uncommon to us. But it's also about the fact that these perspectives need to be cognizant of one another. So I think that was also the biggest value for me in having this meeting, is that local police commissioners were able to share their challenges with UN police and UNDP and foreign embassies in the room. And I thought that was also important, because these the modes of working and also the needs that come out as a result do not necessarily align very good. Of course, we know that the UN mission usually works from the top down with a lot of subject matter experts, on the basis of an international consensus that has its basis in UN resolutions and mandates. And of course, a lot of civil society organizations, they work from the bottom up, taking the community's perspectives as a basis. And what comes out of both these processes does not necessarily line up very well. So that's why, to me, it was very enlightening that, for instance, the UN mission had a lot of trainings that they were giving, for instance, SGBV trainings and human rights trainings, that did not really appear on, let's say, the needs assessment by local police commissioners. Not necessarily because they didn't appreciate these trainings, but because they had other needs than that. So I think it's very important to also try to align these two worlds. And I think we even identified a second gap, or law enforcement gap, is not only between people's communities' expectations and what the police is able to provide, but also how can we connect, let's say, the community-based needs as well as what the international community is able to provide.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks.
John, do you have some additional reflections?
Yes, just a bit. I think out of the meeting that we have conducted 2 weeks ago in Juba regions, I have gotten some lessons that I learned from it. Indeed, I confirmed the gap did exist between the local communities and the law enforcement. The security providers, for example, the police, because of the challenges that they mentioned. And also, I also came to understand that even the police rely much on the international support, that everything should be provided by the international community. But with the training, I could agree, yes, but the national government also should take some responsibilities, especially the protection of civilians. The state should be the primary provider, and then the international NGOs or diplomatic mission or other peace-building organization come in as the second support. So things like stationaries have been mentioned, things like motorbike, cars, offices, these kind of things. If South Sudan could have not been in crisis, these things could have come automatically from the national government. And then capacity building, yes, the international community can provide. I think this thing came out very clearly, and I came to understand that even our national government should have a greater role to play before looking for the support from the international community.
And would you say that for the participants that were in the room, that the national authorities and also the international community stakeholders, were they receptive to those lessons or recommendations?
Yes, they did, yeah.
Right. Thank you for these reflections. Again, if people have questions, want to hear more about this particular event, please feel free to submit questions, whether those of you in the room or those of you watching online. What I'd like to do now is invite our third speaker to the panel, Girmay Gebrekidan. He was formerly a commissioner of police in the Ethiopian Federal Police Commission. He retired in January 2020 after more than 30 years of serving in different police and law enforcement roles, including as a trainer, but also as a strategic advisor in police reform and security resource management, and a national focal point for the Regional Center on Small Arms and Light Weapons. He also served for 6 years in various roles in UN peacekeeping missions in both Sudan and South Sudan, including as the police chief of staff. And this will inform the focus of his contribution today. Girmay has a Master of Arts in Peace and Security Studies with a focus in protection of civilians from Addis Ababa University. Girmay, we're so happy that you could join us today. Thank you. What I'd like to do is welcome you to share some remarks reflecting on your experience and your time with UNPOL, at UNMISS in particular, and perhaps also to respond to some of the reflections that we've seen already in the videos this morning and from our presenters.
Thank you, Carrie. And also thank you, Anton and John, to remind me by those videos how was the police business in South Sudan. The challenges are very dynamic from day to day. When I was in South Sudan from 2009 and 2012, it is before referendum and post-referendum, the challenges was at that time for the police was different. At that time, we were challenging how to integrate the police, from different areas. For example, there was a police officer who was trained by the North Sudan. There was also coming from the guerrilla fighting. There were some militia and also new recruiters. So our challenge was at that time how we can combine this kind of 3-4 categories to make them a police officer to serve their people. I remember when we start training in Wrapup, west 25 kilometers out of Juba. I was the regional deputy training coordinator for Wrapup at that time. We managed to recruit around 400 police officers from the 10 states, the state 10 states, and 400 from the headquarters, around 5,400. We trained them from January 2010 up to November. And also it was a new first batch, new trainees to serve the people. It was inaugurated with the presence of the Security Council, 15 members of the Security Council. So at that time, there was really a high energy to combine those all efforts, the international efforts and also the national contributions. At that time, really the policing was the difficulty was, one of the challenges was illiteracy. There was very, very serious illiteracy in the police business at that time. I don't know, maybe the surveys or the data today, I don't know the status of that, but one of the challenges was the illiteracy, because if there is illiteracy, it's very difficult to give trainings in different capacity to bring them at least to the minimum standards of accepting international policing. But what we have done at that time was really we try first to select the good police officers from their own police presence, and then give them some training of trainers. Then we use them as a trainers to the others, because it's very huge capacity. The first thing when we arrived in Rajaf West to give the training, there was around 42 police officers with me. One of the challenges we get at that time is no one is accepting the area. There is no training center, there is no classrooms, there is only the Nile water and the, what do you call it, the, just the mango trees, and that's it. We need to construct some tents and some facilities to bring them for training. As the time is limited, I don't want to discuss about that more, but I want to focus on the current issue. So at that time, the issue, the international trainers from UNPOL was asking about classrooms at that time. Then we had a discussion. That's why I'm saying the challenges are different from day to day. Then we managed to mobilize around some of them to use the available resource, at least to engage how we can help them. The UNDP was taking on board, the US Embassy was on board, the Japan Embassy, different stakeholders coming, the international committees. Then we try to build side by side. We were using the tents, and also we were building the training center. Now maybe if you have a chance to visit that area, the training center in Rajaf now is at least a minimum standard of police training academy. I think now is the John Garang Training Academy. So now when we talk about policing, we need to understand what means in post-conflict policing. What are the dynamics in post-conflict policing? Because when John and Anton was discussing about the challenges currently on the field, it's true, because on post-conflict policing, it requires a lot of infrastructures, trainers, and also even it requires a strategic thinking and strategic plan. I remember we came up in 2012 a strategic plan for the whole police organization. Then we were setting priorities. I don't know if it's working now or not. So it requires to prioritize what are the minimum, at least what we can do with available resource right now. Anton was talking about the prioritizing from the UN basis. We have given a number of trainings, but are they the priority of the national police or not? That is a very, very critical point. We need to make sure that this, our effort, our international efforts are in line with the local ownership or local priorities. That was the issue from when I was in UNPOL also. That was one of the issues. But what we do at that time is we focus on trainer of trainers to train the others. That is the one short way to at least to build a number of trainers. I have seen the video how it goes back the police business again in South Sudan, because at that time we had around 30,000 police officers. We train around 5,000 new recruits, and also from different perspectives, from different areas, as I mentioned before, from the different categories, from the former police officers, from the guerrilla fighters, from the militia, from different new recruits, to integrate them. It was at least in 2012, especially after post-independence, I was observing a number of police officers with good uniforms, with good infrastructure, but I understand also the challenges we had on the ground, how it goes back. So now, what are the efforts should be done by the international committee? The international committee have done a lot of things at that time. We try to produce a police development committee, to establish a police development committee, because as mentioned before, different stakeholders were doing different things. There was sometimes duplication, sometimes also not focus on the priority of the national police, and also it fails also to understand, to bring the three pillars together: the police, the prosecution, and the court. Because if we talk about rule of law, if we talk about law enforcement, we need to bring on board the three actors together. If we need to see a due process of law, that was the challenge, the first challenge. The other thing is the police development committee was looking how to mobilize different resources from different entities, from different embassies, from different international commissions, from UNDP, from UNMISS. So the police development committee there was around 42 members at that time, from different donors, agencies, funders, programs, even embassies, including I think the Netherlands embassy was part of that also. So it is better to come up with a strategic strategic plan. Then to identify the role of every partner. Then also come up with a reform, at least, as I understand from the video, I think from Awel, see the uniforms, see the police standards, see the police issues. It requires us to prioritize. As the resource is very limited, we need to prioritize which area we need to focus according our available resource. That is very, very important. The other issue is, at that time, I remember we managed to deploy the police officers for referendum security, for election security. That was very successful. By the way, one strong point from the South Sudan policies, they are very quick learners. If you give them a training, they are very good learners. They can come up with guidances, with information you are giving them according to the policies. So, but again, I think it is part of this discussion or not. There are also ghost policies. They are in the payroll, but they are not working in the police. It looks like there is no pension program. So the international community should look on the holistic approach. The first thing is re-equip, retrain, and also look how we can strengthen the institutional capacity. For example, if we need to support them on the pension, I think there was no pension even when I was in 2016, 2019 as the police chief of staff. One of my tasks was to coordinate the GIP program, the Joint Integrated Police, from the opposition and from the government side. We were trying to integrate them, to bring them to the police force, but unluckily there was a lot of challenges, including the conflict. So we didn't manage at that time. I don't know what is the status now, but it is better to come up with an initial plan to bring the South Sudan police at least to the minimum standards, including to look which area requires focuses. As I mentioned before, pension was one of the challenges because the police officer, if the police officer is not retiring, if there is no benefit after retirement, you can imagine how many police officers are in the payroll, but not in the action. The second one is there was no standard also on the starting from the equipment. For example, communication strategy, patrol strategy, and again, even the uniforms. You can see how many kind of uniforms are flying around. Even it can confuse to the community who are serving on the ground. So the international community should come with a well-planned, using the survey mentioned before and other surveys, to come up with a well approach to support the institution, the police officers, and also even I doubt about their payments also. In Somalia, there is experience, the UNDP was paying for the police officers for a period of time to bring them to at least to encourage them to do the police business for their community. So even subsidy, we need to focus a lot of things. But I know, I understand the resource is limited. So clearly understand the local law enforcement perceptions and also listen them, what are their priorities? And also focus on the human development. Instead of bringing equipment, communications, and focus on the human development, retrain, and also encourage the local community also to discuss on the police issue. There is some bias on the community policing approach in South Sudan. I think I saw the report, Anton, thank you. There are some issues. There is a bias on that. We need to come up with a holistic approach, how we can address this issue. I think because of time, I was talk about the way forward, but I don't know, Carrie, if I have time or not, or I can answer in some questions.
Thank you so much, Girmay. I think you really hit already on a lot of incredibly important points that we'd like to take further into this discussion with our audience for the rest of the session. You did a very nice job of highlighting some of the very tangible, practical realities, as well as linking this to some of the broader sort of policy setting agenda needs as well. And thanks for reflecting as well on the need to better link local perceptions, local priorities with the capacities and priorities of the international and national authorities as well. What I'd like to do is now open the floor for discussion. While you type your questions in, for those of you joining us online using the Slido module, I just want to remind a few points about how we'll be moderating this part of the session. Everyone is welcome to submit questions, again, using the Q&A function. Please include your name if you can, and if you'd like to direct your question to a specific panelist, please indicate to whom you would like to do so. We have about 25, nearly 30 minutes set aside still for discussion, so hopefully we'll get to as many questions as time and technology allow. Guests who are joining us in person should also feel free to come forward to the microphone here in the center of the room if you'd like to ask a question directly to our panelists. And please do also remember that the event is being recorded and will be broadcast later on our website. I'll start first with a question from the audience, first to Anton, and then maybe also to Girmay to respond thereafter. Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between UN police, UNPOL, and the South Sudanese police forces? What types of trainings is the UN indeed conducting for local police? And are these really reflective indeed of the needs on the ground? We've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can make that a little bit more clear for our audience.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the main tasks of UN police was to protect the formerly POC sites in South Sudan. So they were the camps where a lot of refugees came to live in 2013, 2014 after the conflict erupted. But as they have transferred sovereignty of many of these camps already over to the South Sudanese authorities, I think the main responsibility for UN police now is to support police training. Although, as far as I know, is that UN police is providing very specific trainings towards the police. So the general education or training of police is a task of the South Sudanese authorities, who are running a police academy. And UN police is assisting that and is also providing additional trainings, for instance, in the fields of SGBV and human rights training. And whether or not they support each other, I think it's better maybe to ask someone from UNPOL to see how that relationship in reality is. But I can say that also from our experiences in the field is that this police training is not always very evenly executed. So we come across a lot of police officers who claim that they haven't been trained at all. So, for instance, there are a lot of dropouts from the military, for instance, that are then being redirected to police without any additional training. So that is why we often also receive these requests of police officers who say, I need to have basic police training, understanding what the police is actually for. What is the role of the police concerning the communities? So that's at least what I can say. But maybe someone from UN police can, or maybe Mr. Gebrekidan can also comment on what is the formal role of the UN police in relationship to the South Sudanese police.
So, Girmay, to you, please.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Anton. It is difficult to mention. There is a clear task because it depends on the mandate. The previous mandate, when I was in 2009, it was clearly training of the police officers, collocating with them, with the police officers, because to monitor them and to assist them how to do the police business. But again, also we were at that time, it was fully mandated to train, to equip the police officers as much as we can. Even we were coordinating through the police development committee, because the police commissioner was the vice chairman of the police development committee. It was headed by the Minister of Interior. The IGP was the second, and the third was the police commissioner from the UNMISS, from UNPOL. So again, when I go back again in 2016, it was limited mandate. We are focusing only to see on human rights issues and SGBV. So you can see if the police officer does not have a proper knowledge of policing, to add some SGBV or some human rights aspects will be very difficult. So it depends on the mandate. The mandate was, now I think when I was living in 2019, there was some loophole on JIP, Joint Integrated Policing, to train from both sides to bring them for policy. So it depends on the mandate. The mandate was, it is highly politicized. And also when we are dealing with the national counterparts, it requires to look the overall mandate. So now I think there is some training aspects, but the training we were giving, and also the local need is not always in the same manner. So it was difficult. It was different. That is the issue I want to raise. So the UNPOL need to raise this issue to the mandate reviewers or to different stakeholders to see how they can help the local police on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those additions, Girmay. I'd like to ask you, John. We just heard that the UNPOL is indeed providing training, for instance, in specific issues like dealing with SGBV. But I'm wondering if you can share your perspective on how well women are reflected in the South Sudanese police force, as well as what challenges might exist to having police engage on issues of sexual and gender-based violence in the context.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, indeed, women are enthusiastic to join police. Even in our data, the survey that we collect in the community, they did recommend that there should be presence of women in the police because now the number of women serving in the police is not that big, it's small. And when issues come, issues that are involving women, for example, their detention and other things that involve women, of course, it would be good for women to participate, to be in police, such that they take care of their fellow women, because it would be very, very bad, for a police male to, for example, say a female victim. So there are a number of women that are being enrolled now in the police, but the criteria is something that is not very, very, very clear, because we are seeing some women joining police, and some of them, according to what I've been seeing in the ground, some of them are being recruited by their relatives who are big general in the police, and some of them are just included in the police simply because they may be getting salaries, not that they will really do the police work. As Girmay said before, that there is no policy of pension. You see that there are a lot of old men in the police who are not physically strong, to run after criminals. This is a big challenge. And also the fact that some people have been removed from the army and absorbed to police without the proper training is one of the challenges. So generally, we in the ground wanted to see a lot of women in the police. Not just women, but the first thing should be education. They should first of all get education and then get to police, so that they do the right thing. The issue of illiteracy is a big problem in our country, both to men and women. And that's why even the training is not really effective, because a lot of people they lack proper education. And generally, I would like to say that many women in the police would play a very great role, and that is what our people are expecting now. Although some women who are in police are the category I just described, which doesn't bring a lot of impact. Yeah. So, yep.
Well, you hit there, of course, on two of the same themes that we're hearing over and over again. One, that there might be a disconnect in the way in which training is provided with the actual capacities of the people who are receiving the training, but also that there's not always sufficient information for security providers themselves about the actual needs of people on the ground. And that translates also at the national and international level. Maybe specifically on this point about dealing with issues that are specific to sub-communities, in this case, women and girls. When you're surveying community perceptions around security and protection, do you collect gender disaggregated data using the HSS? And if so, could you maybe highlight some of the key needs that you notice that have sort of implications based on an individual's gender? And then maybe if we can also reflect, John, a little bit on the degree to which local authorities feel like they need and can use this information to respond differently to the needs of their communities.
Yeah, to answer your first question, yes, we do collect gender disaggregated data. As a matter of fact, we even quite consistently have higher levels of female participation respondents in our surveys than male respondents. So I think we generally can paint a very good picture of what are women's needs in the community concerning security. We did not encounter very striking differences in the security perception between men and women in most instances. We do, for instance, have particular questions that I think also relate to women more in asking, do they perceive that the treatment of them by the police, of women, or their handling of cases towards women? Do they encounter any differences? Do they perceive differences in how men are being treated? And generally, it is being perceived that the police is generally a neutral actor. So there are not like very big gender differences in how they respond. And of course, as John was also alluding to, we ask whether or not people think that there should be more women joining the police, which is generally approved by most respondents. And it was also interesting that, for instance, during the last session we had, we were also getting a bit of a reality check, because while most people in the survey agree that there should be more women joining the police and that they would even would like to see, for instance, women members of their family joining the police, is that in reality there's still a lot of challenges when women actually want to join the police. For instance, if they do not get particular support or permissions from husbands or fathers or other male members of the family, or they're often being perceived as only having some use in the office doing administrational work, but considered physically unfit to do the actual police work outside, which is still challenging for of course women participation in the police. That also needs to be addressed if we want to see these numbers rising.
Yeah, absolutely. And then John, to you, if you can reflect a bit again on, in your conversations with local law enforcement officials, to what degree are they eager to have this gender disaggregated information and able to respond to the different protection needs of men and women?
Yeah, they are always positive that there is a need for women to be part of the police, because women are neutral, they don't take side, and there are a lot of issues in the police. Also, what was challenging for other people, they oppose, women being in police. Some would say that they are not physically strong to be part of police, and they can't be deployed in remote areas where they would leave their families. So it is very difficult to transfer the police woman to a distance far away from their families. So there are some elements, there are some people in the police who are against it. But to the entire population, they do recommend that there is a need for women to be in police, because there is a need, there is a real need that they should be in police, because they will take care of their fellow women. Because when you talk of police, it is a center where everybody comes in. It's where all the issues are being addressed. And of course, even if there is no that kind of segregation between men and women in the police, how they are being served, but there is a need for women to be there, to watch and to take care of their fellow women. I think it's something that is very, 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 very important, and it has to be considered. But generally, what makes the matter worse are the two things that I mentioned earlier: the level of illiteracy that we have in the country, and our country is just in the crisis, so even the salaries is not paid on time. So you going there to be in police, and then you leave your household work, and at the end you will not get good salary or good pay. It makes no change. That is the challenge.
Indeed, could make it an additional challenge for recruiting and maintaining sort of the best and brightest to serve in your security forces. Maybe a sort of related point, I'll turn first to Girmay, and then maybe Anton or John, if you'd like to respond as well. How can we make sure that police are accountable to the local population rather than accountable to those providing international training or support to them? Girmay, maybe from your experience also just serving as a police officer yourself.
Well, as mentioned before, accountability, it should come from the police doctrine and also from the training, which kind of training we are giving to the police officers, if I get your question correct, the accountability and also the police, there should be trained the police discipline. The police discipline, the police, they should have courage. They should have compassion to serve the police service. And also they should be encouraged also. As John mentioned before, one of the discouragement is salary. If you don't get salary on time, then how we are going to encourage and to be accountable for the things you are going to do. The other things are the trainings. If they need basic police training and we are giving them only issue on human rights or in gender perspective, how we can expect the police officer should be accountable according to the accepted standards of policing. So the accountability should be related on the what kind of training we are giving them. But again, also, if they accept to be a police officer, they should be accountable for what they have done. They should be accountable for their community, for the people, for according to the rule of law. There is a governing law. There is a due process of law. When they are joining the police, they sworn to serve the people instead of persons. So they should be accountable. But to make them accountable, we need to clarify what are the responsibilities. We need to give them what are the responsibilities A to Z. Then what are the mechanisms to do this. Then if you or fail this, there should be accountability comes on board. So it depends what kind of police officers we are building in the country. I understand it will be a huge challenge, but we can start it by models. For example, if we have some 5 or 6 areas, counties or something, to start the policing and to give them proper training, proper equipment, proper encouragement, then to make them accountable. I think, as far as my understanding, when I was in South Sudan, they are very ready to make a difference on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Girmay. I think particularly for bringing this more institutional perspective around accountability structures within police. Maybe, John, to you, from the perspective of a South Sudanese civilian, maybe you can also reflect on how civilians might have a greater sense of that accountability relationship with their own police.
Yeah, the citizens always complain of police not responsive. Although in our research, it highly indicates that the only security actor that is closest to the people is the police, and that is the only actor that they could report any incident on any security threat or anything that happened to them. But at the end, you find that most people say police is not responsive. They don't take issues seriously. They don't address matters as they expect, simply because they themselves agree that we don't do this because we lack facilities. For example, the case is reported to a police that something happened, robbery, for example, and the police would not do anything at that moment because they don't have mobility, as they say it. Or some people may say that, can you bring me some papers and pens? You see, you bring the stationaries for me to do your work. Those kind of things were some of the complaints. Although these are just minor things that the office could have, the police could have facilitated themselves. So yeah, I think as Girmay just spoke about discipline in the training, I do agree. You know, for a police to be accountable, the accountability starts from the training. They have to be disciplined. And when they join the police, they take an oath that they will really serve the citizen. And as you put the uniform of a police, you know that you are going to serve the civilian. So on that basis, if you breach the accountability, then you'll face the discipline as it is written, as it is provided in the court, in the police code. So I think, but the most important thing is there is a need for their motivation. They need to be given good salaries, and on time, say that they cannot breach what they have committed themselves to. So the accountability begins from the government, because if they give them facilities, the stationaries, the office equipment, the mobility, the salaries, and then they go against what they have taken oath for, then they should face the discipline. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think you're again highlighting one of the sort of core components of our own Protection of Civilians program, indeed, which is bringing civilians in dialogue with the local protection actors who are most relevant and available to them to indeed have more open and free discussion and better sort of mutual understanding of expectations around the actual capacities and the actual priorities and needs of civilians, given the scarce resources that are available. What I'd like to do, we're nearing the end of our session. I'd like to ask each of our three panelists to reflect on just one very specific suggestion on the way forward to help really improve international support to local security actors in the context of South Sudan. Maybe I'll first go to Girmay joining us remotely, and then in the studio.
And the last question,
yes,
I didn't catch you.
Sure. Please, if you could share one very clear, concrete suggestion as for the best way forward that the international community can support local security forces in South Sudan.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying, even when in our discussion, I was trying to highlight this very important question. The first thing is they need to, there should be integration. Different international actors are dealing with different issues. So we need to integrate. There are sometimes duplications. There are sometimes also funds, there are a limitation of funds also. So one thing is they should come up with one umbrella to support the South Sudan local law enforcement organs to bring the resources together. And also even if it's impossible to bring the resource together, they can also share the responsibility, not to minimize the duplications. So if one is focusing on retraining, the other will focus on re-equipping, the other will focus also in communication or something like that. So there should be agreed document to prioritize according to the limited available resource to equip the South Sudan police service. Not only the police service, also the prison service, the prosecution, and the court system also. So this is the thing. The other thing is you mentioned about the women participation on policing. I want to emphasize here. In 2010, when we are recruiting around 400 police officers from the local community, we managed to mobilize around 358 police officers from women police officers. They were very active and very energetic. They were young police officers. So even you need to set up a precondition when they are recruiting police officers to look for the women who are engaging, because they are very, very useful on resolving some disputes, some conflicting issues. I saw them when they are doing on the dispute resolution on the POS sites. And also I observe them in different mechanisms in different, if you go to Torit, there are a number of police officers, women police officers who are helping the community. So what I think is the international community should come up to prioritize the challenges from the local community and the local police. They should listen what are their challenges. Then they will design how they can going to help them, and also that will be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Girmay. I'm going to take my moderator's privilege. Unfortunately, I don't believe we have time for Anton and John to still respond. But I do want to thank all three of you so much for your really thoughtful contributions. Certainly to all of the members of our audience who submitted questions.
Sorry to take more time. Sorry for that.
That's okay. Thank you for your contributions. Yeah. What I'd like to do is ask our moderators to please make visible some questions to the audience joining us online, just some very quick feedback questions that we have that you can fill out while we conclude the session. And if you have any additional questions or feedback that you'd like to share with those of us on PAX's POC team, please feel free to email us at poc@paxforpeace.nl. I apologize that we weren't able to respond to all of the questions that you submitted, but if you would like to keep the conversation going with our speakers that were here on the panel today or with one another, we invite you to join us during all of the breaks throughout the next 3 days in the networking tools on our platform. If you visit the Meet and Connect tab on the online platform, you'll be able to connect with one another to chat or to schedule either one-on-one or group video calls. Thanks again to Anton, to John, and of course also to Girmay for joining us today. We really look forward to seeing you over the course of the next 3 days. We also hope you'll all stay with us and join us in just 15 minutes time for the next interactive session entitled International Support to Local Security Actors in the Sahel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.